I feel like Robert Zemeckis went to Disney World, saw Carousel of Progress, and went, I could turn something like that into a movie, but then didn't include Disney. He said, no thanks. Here, directed by Robert Zemeckis, the guy behind, of course, Back to the Future, Castaway, some all-time greats, returns with Tom Hanks in this new feature about life and time. So let's break it down and let's give it a score. First, let's talk about the acting, because in all honesty, there isn't any issues I have with the acting within this film. There is no character that stands out as being horrible when it comes to how they are portrayed, as well as how the actor kind of portrays them. Tom Hanks is amazing as per usual. He's just there. He's great at what he does and does it well. I didn't really have any issues with his performance in particular throughout the whole film. And then you have Robin Wright, who is the other main character within this film. She plays the wife of Tom Hanks. And yeah, same thing. No issues with her performances whatsoever. And she might even be a little bit better than Tom Hanks throughout the entire film. Now, I don't want to count out any points for this because, well, there's the kid actors. There's a lot of kid actors in this film because, again, it takes place over a period of times, and it does deal with a lot of growing up. So, of course, there's bound to be children. They're all fine. There wasn't a kid where I was kind of like, you're a little annoying. So, kudos to all the kids in this film. When it comes to the other characters, the other side characters, again, no bad performances whatsoever. There just feels like sometimes that there isn't enough for that character to do, but that's for another category in particular. But at the end of the day, there isn't a performance where I sat there and watched the film and went, holy moly, I'm in love with this. There isn't that moment of bliss where I'm going, this is a performance that everyone needs to see. So unfortunately, I'm just going to give it a half a star out of 1 within the acting category. When it comes to the visuals, of course, the whole selling point kind of on this film is the fact that it's practically one angle. It's one angle, like if you set pretty much like a GoPro up, click time lapse, and you went through history in a singular spot. It plays with time, and it plays with time fairly well when it comes to the visual aspect of it all. You see the dinosaurs roam all the way to, modern day. And you get everything kind of in between throughout the film. You also do get these interesting transitions from one time period to another. Basically like a photo book kind of sense where there's a frame and it's taken to a new place in time, or it's the old place in time. And it transitions very interestingly because the frame slowly just disappears. It's a good concept, and I've enjoyed it very much. But where there are pros, there's always cons, and the biggest con within this film when it comes to the visual aspect of it all is the CGI. You can't get real dinosaurs. You can't get a real deer. You can't get a real hummingbird. And sometimes you can't even get real people. I'm serious. There's a shot where there's fake people. And it's horrible. It looks horrible, and I hated it. I was so excited because this film practically sells itself on the fact that it's this visually creative looking film that is this one angle throughout time. I honestly was not as bored as I thought I would be, just because, as you know me, I like me an active camera, and this camera was stale. It just sat there. It just didn't move, and you know what? I was cool with it because it works with what they're trying to tell. But the CGI becomes so distracting. I would also like to point out that they do de-age some of these characters. And yeah, you can't really tell. It's not that bad, to be honest. Sometimes you get that weird glossy look. The eyes don't look right. Their facial expressions don't look right. It was okay. It wasn't bad and distracting like the horrible CGI was. So overall, I'm just going to give it half a star out of 1 within this category. Audio. Now, audio, of course, this is a film that takes place over time. So, of course, you're going to get the greatest hits, baby. Yes, you get a playlist of some of the greatest hits within the past 50 years plus, right? You get some of these songs that just start going and you get into the mood and you get kind of in that era that they're giving off the vibe of. It's done incredibly well, and I really enjoyed that aspect because, yeah, throw the money at getting the license rights for all this because this film needs that. And then it comes down to also the score. The score wasn't too memorable. It wasn't bad, though. It wasn't a film where I kind of was like, that score is too unmemorable. I don't remember it. I can kind of make out now what it kind of sounded like. But overall, it's just kind of mid. It's not groundbreaking. It's kind of like the performances. Nothing groundbreaking, but nothing horrible to the point to where I'm so upset at it. One of the biggest issues, though, I have is the fact that, well, in order to pull this kind of movie off, all these were done definitely on closed sets. Probably just replicated the same room X amount of times, put different props in there, and let the characters go at it. Now, why am I talking about set decoration and all that other stuff when it comes to audio? Because it sounds like they're on a soundstage. The audio seems so inauthentic, and there's moments in the film where I definitely felt there's ADR in here, and I don't like it. I can tell that the actor's mouth is not syncing with the character's voice, and it's just not working. And sometimes it goes dark, and when it goes dark, yeah, you can kind of tell that some of these lines were after the fact. It's distracting, and it's not good. But music can transport people back in time, and this film does it, and does it really well. So I'm just going to give it a half a star out of 1 within this category. It has its faults, but it does really well on succeeding at things. Now to the story. When you're making a film with a huge grand concept like this, you need a story that can match its flair. This story shows, like I said, basically a singular spot in existence over time in the people that occupy the space in what it is. You get historical references, you get time frames in which you probably never were expecting to see during this film, and you get, of course, different families that live and breathe within this, occupied space. Unfortunately, the film takes a direction which I didn't expect they would, and they tell it in a non-linear fashion. Now, I don't mind non-linear films. I think sometimes it works incredibly well for a reason. Take, for instance, Strange Darling earlier this year, or mid this year. It was so good because it was non-linear. If it was a linear storyline, it would not work. This film, however, should have gone linear. The reason being is the disconnect you have with characters. You don't see them grow. You see things happen out of order and out of sequence, and it changes things. Side stories are dropped, then picked back up again. Random side stories are started. It's all a clunky disaster of a mess. Like I said in the intro, it feels like it was kind of like Carousel of Progress. But imagine if you went to see Carousel of Progress, but it was out of order. It would just take you on a wild ride that makes no sense and confuses the viewer. Now, I don't know if it will confuse the viewer. I wasn't confused on the story. It just didn't grip me as emotionally as I probably would want it to if they told it linear. And the biggest impact of them all, of course, is that ending. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. If you're telling a story in a non-linear fashion, the reason why you do it, in my opinion, right, my humble crappy opinion, right? The reason you tell something non-linear is because at the end there's a twist. There's something at the end you don't want the audience to know that makes more sense why you're telling things out of sequence. You're trying to make the viewer change perspectives when they're watching it, pick kind of what they're going for, and then when the ending happens, you go, wow, I didn't see that coming. Now, I don't need a M. Night Shyamalan twist, but you need something that incentivizes the viewer on creating this nonlinear story. I had more questions than I had answers leaving the film, and even though it's a high concept film, it's not supposed to have that, right? This is supposed to be a easy to watch high concept film, right? It's supposed to be easier to watch and have this kind of look into time and space and relationships and all of that jazz, and it falls flat on its face. So with all that being said, I gotta give it 0 stars out of 1. I didn't like enjoyment. So, what do you think? Acting is good, not great. Visually, somewhat appealing, smart concept, bad CGI. Audio, great songs, decent score, horrible obvious ADR. Story, messy. I left the film very disappointed. I think the concept is really, really strong. It's been done before, right? But it's such a smart concept. But the fact that it's in a non-linear fashion, it throws off the emotional weight of everything. There's 3 more things I'd like to talk about this film. One is there's a storyline involving a couple and an invention, right? I don't want to spoil anything. I thought, wow, this is cool. History, right? Because they had also some other historical things happen in this area, which again, I won't go into, but I liked that part. This part, however, I was interested in it until I Googled some, and of course, maybe the internet is deceiving me and I didn't look deep enough. They totally lied, it seems like. Again, I might just be dumb. That is very possible. I am not sometimes the brightest bulb, right? But the quick Google search, the quick search I did on this topic showed up with a different name or names, and I was very kind of, what was the point of that? Made no sense. It was cool until I Googled it. Number 2 was a conversation between a couple and their child about police, right? And it was definitely a nice entry to see that conversation happen, right? Because it's common. It's a thing we're dealing with in this country, and it was impactful. It was arguably probably the most impactful moment in the entire film, and these weren't even the main characters. And then number 3, I love high concept, deep movies. It feels high concept, but it has so many shortcomings that it's hard to look over. Not a lot of people love this movie, but I love A Ghost Story. It's so good, right? And it's a similar film, a film that takes place in a location that talks about time and love and loss and all these things that this film tackles, that film tackles, but extremely well. I didn't want to say this at first because I didn't want to spoil that this is how I felt, but it feels like Robert Zemeckis watched A Ghost Story, went to Disney World, saw Carousel of Progress, and said, I'm going to make a movie mashing these 2 ideas together. And he made a more palatable, a more general, a more watered down version of A Ghost Story mixed with Carousel of Progress. So, if you're keeping track at home, Here by Robert Zemeckis gets a 1.5 out of 5 stars. I think this film is bad.